Welcome into a very special edition of the Swamp 247 podcast. I'm Jacob Rudner alongside my co-host Blake Alderman. And Blake, we weren't exactly expecting to have to do this. We recorded a podcast episode yesterday, but just a couple hours later, Florida gets a commitment from four-star defensive back Sharif Denson. We did not get a chance to talk about him on the full edition of the Swamp 247 podcast. So here we are to break down the commitment of Florida's now second highest rated player in its 2023 class. What are the Florida Gators getting in Sharif Denson? And tell us a little bit about the player.
I really like Sharif Denson, and I think he's someone that has been playing at the varsity level at a fairly high level since his freshman year of high school. I think he wasn't really known much as being, a speedster track guy, someone that has gone out on the track and just, throw down these blazing type of defensive back numbers that you've seen for some of those guys. I think the short shuttle time, that's something that even our colleague at 24/7 Sports, Andrew Ivins, had mentioned, was that the short shuttle, and that shows quickness and burst. And I think whenever you have a guy like Denson who can move around in the defensive secondary, and that's something that Florida really likes about him, is the fact that he can play a little bit of everything back there. He can be an outside corner. He can play the star nickel position of what they look for. I think that's more of his wheelhouse, of being that guy that's going to play in the slot, safety, cornerback, nickel type of role. But I think that the fact that he's got that quick burst is something you really want for a guy that's going to sort of play in the box, have, limited space there, and can make those moves quickly. He's someone that whenever I look at defensive backs, I think one of my favorite things is, sure, you look at the speed and the frame and all those things are important. He's not afraid to tackle. That's something that I really put a lot of faith in on, defensive backs. He's someone that's going to hit you. He's not afraid to hit you. He has good ball skills. He's competitive, all those types of things. But I really like the fact that he is physical and he was not afraid to hit. So I think that's something that's really going to help him out a lot in that nickel type of role. I think whenever you look at this one, like you mentioned, he has those family ties to Florida. Both of his parents went to Florida. And it's, Florida, I remember talking to Sharif whenever he was back, playing for the Pro Impact 7-on-7 team, which has a lot of guys out of the Jacksonville area. I remember talking to him back when he was a freshman. He was offered by the previous staff. Florida was the leader right off of that, that offer right off the jump whenever they were one of the first teams to get involved with him. Obviously, a coaching change happens down the road. He had to get to know some new faces. But the fact that he has always really liked Florida is something that is registered with him. And he was actually on campus last Wednesday for Florida 7-on-7 camp that they had on campus with his high school teammates at Bartram Trail. Got a chance to do some unofficial visit things too, breaking down film with Patrick Toney, getting to tour the new facility with both Toney and head coach Billy Napier. So he got to do a lot of those things. And he had mentioned after talking to him that the amount of time and effort and conversations that he has with Coach Toney and, doing some of the film breakdowns of seeing his game and how it translates to, to Florida's defense, and just the way that they really informed him on how they would want to use him were some of the biggest things. And he even pointed out point blank that, no other defensive coordinator that I have been recruited by is doing the things that Patrick Toney has done as far as, recruiting me and informing me on things. So, a big chunk of credit deserves, for Coach Toney on this one. He actually, throughout the day on Monday had been trying, because Sharif has been a guy that's been leaning to Florida. And Coach Toney, I heard, from kind of checking into some sources, was really on him about, come on, man, you have been liking Florida. You've got the family ties. You're just here. Let's get some of this momentum going. And he actually got him to go through with that one. So I know if you're listening to the previous podcast that we recorded that was right before there, I was questioning some things on some closing. And, that's something that we'll still see going forward on, how the staff closes on things. That's a perfect example right there of closing something down. A guy that was talking about making a decision sometime later in the fall, getting him to, pull the trigger now on a school that he's been leaning to for quite some time. So, overall, I really like the addition for Florida. I think he's going to fit a really big role that they need at that star position. And I think he checks all of those boxes of what you'd want in that spot.
Absolutely. And if you listen to our longer version of the podcast before the Denson commitment, one of the things you and I talked about, Blake, was how Florida has done a good job of sticking within its 500-mile footprint, something that Billy Napier talked about when he was hired. That gives Florida now 9 total commitments, every single one of them from within 350 miles of Gainesville. 8 of those commitments are from the state of Florida. What does that do for the momentum of the program and kind of what their goals are moving forward in terms of geographically recruiting and putting together these classes from within their footprint?
Well, from talking to, some of these guys that live in the surrounding areas of Gainesville, you've had them say that Billy Napier told them very early on whenever things started to turn the page to the 2023 class, that those, I want to say it was like a 45-minute circle. If you put one up outside of Gainesville, those are the guys that they want to prioritize. So not only have they done that with a lot of those guys in this class, obviously some are a little bit farther away, but locking down the state of Florida and keeping these guys in the state of Florida is an important part of recruiting. You have the state of Florida where all these big schools, the Alabamas, the Clemsons, the Georgias, you name it, they are trying to come into the state of Florida to recruit some of the best players in the country. So you need to keep a lot of those guys in state, having some more, just face time of, being those, and that goes for really all the in-state schools, of keeping some of these guys home. Obviously something Florida wants to do badly. Really trying to capitalize in those Gator-friendly areas, the Ocalas, the Gainesvilles, the Jacksonvilles. A lot of those guys are represented in Florida's class. And even guys right there on that I-4 corridor of Polk County, Orlando, Tampa area. You've seen a lot of those guys being targeted by Florida. Obviously, a guy like Isaiah Nixon, the 4-star edge, is from that, St. Petersburg area. So it's kind of in their wheelhouse of areas that have been Gator-friendly or, kind of pro-Florida, the Central Floridas, the North Florida areas of the state of Florida. So I think I like the fact that they're hitting on areas that are Gator friendly, but they're also getting some quality players. What is it? 3 commits in the last week for Florida.
Yep.
Adding there, but not only are they 3 of the highest players in Florida's class currently right now, as far as the rankings go, but they're all in those Gator friendly areas. So I think that they're doing a good job. I mentioned on the previous podcast that we shot before that they're the guys they have landed so far in the class, the offensive linemen, the defensive linemen, some defensive backs, those, and at wide receiver, those are areas that Florida really wanted to add some talent on there. Those were some of the bigger areas of focus for Florida. If you could throw a linebacker in there, but obviously there's none in the class right now for there. But those areas and positions are ones that Florida really want to focus on. But so not only are they hitting on some of those positions of need, but they're doing it in areas that are good to Florida, on top of getting some really quality players too.
Absolutely. And if you're interested in listening to that podcast or this one, we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or really wherever you get your podcast. Plus, you can watch us in video form on YouTube. And I think, Blake, that'll do it for our short, quick hitter episode of the Swamp 247 podcast. Any final thoughts on the recruiting front for the Gators before we sign off of this one?
Nothing I can really think of. We'll see how some of these, timelines, as far as, things can change quickly. You've got a guy like 4-star running back Treyon Webb, who is planning to announce his commitment on June 30th, has said that he will no longer be doing that now. We've got a guy in 4-star running back Cedric Baxter, who's one of the top running backs in the country. A couple weeks ago, he was talking about maybe deciding sometime in December. Well, he moved that up to August 10th. So I think one of the things to keep on, as far as guys that, live, breathe, and eat the recruiting, is that a lot of these guys are moving around timelines. So while it may be a dead period right now, there's still things happening. Florida's coaching staff is on some, getting some much needed vacation. They're still hitting the recruiting trail, making sure to keep their calls and texts in, kind of keeping their thumb on the pulse of a lot of these recruitments. And they're going to need to, because I'm struggling right now to keep up with all the decision timelines that are being moved around. So good luck to them.
Absolutely. Well, that'll do it for this very short episode of the Swamp 247 podcast. As always, make sure you're keeping it locked on the site, where we will have news about recruiting, football, basketball, baseball. We've got it all covered. And we will see you next time for what is hopefully going to be a longer version of the show. But for this one, that'll do it. See you next time.